This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
This week on America's Now.
No tenemos la fuerza física, pero sí tenemos la fuerza de nuestro corazón de poder alzar nuestras voces, a hablar, decir también como vocera ahora que estoy de la comunidad. No queremos minería, no queremos que contamine nuestros ríos.
Illegal gold mining in Ecuador's Amazon.
What the COFAN succeeded in doing is first to be fully united behind one strategy, one cause, and really walking together. We've seen many communities facing the similar threats, but not succeeding in being united behind this whole land defense strategy.
Native Americans displaced by climate change.
There's no job here. When they get their master's degree, when they get their PhD, when they come back to the reservation, then they go to Window to apply for a job, they're always being told, you're overqualified. We cannot hire you.
Expats and the real estate market in Mexico.
Here in Mexico City, a lot of people are tending to go to the neighborhoods like Condesa, Roma, Cuauhtemoc, and the reason mainly is pricing. Housing is still extremely affordable in those areas.
Eradicating illiteracy in the poorest areas of Bolivia.
Cuán grato es ver a una persona, ¿no? Es el que escriba su nombre a sus 80 años, 70 años, es pues como si ellos conquistasen algo tan grande como ahora, a veces se puede decir ir al espacio, ¿no? Y es un logro grande para ellos.
Next.
Ucatja, acaja es con eso caja. Y
Welcome to America's Now. I'm Elaine Reyes in Washington, D.C. Earlier this year, Ecuadorian President Guillermo Lasso declared illegal mining a threat to national security, linking it to organized crime. But with gold prices at an all-time high, that has done little to stop the miners. Dan Collyns visited an indigenous village where residents have formed their own brigade to protect their territory from invasion.
They carry spears made from palm wood, but they are also armed with geographic mapping phones and walkie-talkies. The ICOFAN Indigenous Guard is Ecuador's first uniformed group of nature protectors.
From unity comes strength. The ICOFAN of Sinangoy regularly patrol their territory to detect, document and stop invaders who come in search of gold.
They patrol a territory of 630 square kilometers, stretching for more than 2,500 meters above sea level in the Andes Mountains down into the Amazon rainforest. They're on the lookout for this, the wanton destruction of their forests and rivers by gold hunters. From the air, you can see the devastation wrought by this destructive form of alluvial gold mining. Along the Aguarico, a river sacred to the COFAN, miners with heavy diggers routinely invaded to rip up the earth and rock in search of the precious metal. They even entered the protected Cayambicoca National Park, yet the authorities, including park guards, apparently could do little to stop them. So the ICOFAN decided to police their ancestral land under their own laws.
tenemos el deber que nuestros abuelos, nuestros padres nos estaban dando ahora ese trabajo de hacer. Entonces, a pesar de los miedos, a pesar de todo, se formó la Guardia Indígena. En este caso nos llamamos Cuirazundeku en nuestro idioma, que quiere decir cuidadores de nuestro territorio.
Narvaez was the first woman to join the group of territorial guardians in 2017. It now numbers 26 members. She remembers some of the men laughed because the job was considered too tough for a woman. But following her lead, more women have joined the Indigenous Guard, and not just to cook, but also to safeguard the territory.
No tenemos la fuerza física, pero sí tenemos la fuerza de nuestro corazón de poder alzar nuestras voces, a hablar, decir también como vocera ahora que estoy de la comunidad. No queremos minería, no queremos que contamine nuestros ríos.
Some of the younger members have learned to use drones to monitor and record what's happening across their 63,775 hectares of land. Equipped with state-of-the-art technology, the ICOFAN keep track of threats to their territory.
De tener mucha información del territorio, como puede ser el GPS, el drone, las cámaras trampas, el mapeo mismo que se hace, ha ayudado a identificar lugares, ¿no? Lugares, como me ha dicho el GPS, tener ubicaciones de amenazas y con esa información nosotros poder denunciar al Estado o a las entidades públicas que tengan que darnos respuestas, ¿no?
Using camera traps mounted on trees, devices normally used to capture images of elusive wild animals, they have filmed the invaders. All this has served as proof of secretive forays by miners and poachers into the land they protect. And it has provided evidence used in court to win a series of legal landmarks. Much of that mining was not strictly illegal. In fact, it belonged to 52 formal mining concessions. But last year, after a 6-year-long legal battle, Ecuador's Constitutional Court ratified a ruling that suspended all the concessions. The country's highest court ruled that the 50-odd families in the Sinangoe community would have to give their permission for any extractive projects in their territory. It also ruled the mining concessions violated their right to a healthy environment, based on Ecuador's rights of nature laws enshrined in its 2008 constitution. It was a key victory for the ICOFAN, and it set a legal precedent, encouraging other groups to use the courts, says their lawyer, Jorge Acero.
En el contexto y la coyuntura que estábamos, había muchas comunidades indígenas o campesinas que consideraban que no era útil ir a buscar la protección de los jueces, porque no había funcionado durante años. Y después y durante todo el proceso de Sinangoe fueron muchos más casos los que fueron incluyéndose o iniciándose.
But while those legal mining concessions have been suspended, illegal gold mining has grown exponentially in Ecuador's Amazon, devouring at least 1,660 hectares of forest in the last 5 years. Driven by record international gold prices, topping $2,000 per ounce, the devastation has spread across the rainforest. Locals say a gram of gold extracted from a riverbed can sell for $50 US, and there are willing buyers. Not long ago, that gram cost around $30. Earlier this year, Ecuador declared the activity a national security threat, explained the Vice Minister for the Environment.
La minería ilegal es la que más daño causa a nuestros recursos naturales, contamina nuestros cuerpos hídricos, hay afectación a la flora y fauna, hay desbroce de vegetación nativa, hay afectaciones a la calidad del aire y, como lo mencionaba al inicio, en muchos casos ya no hablamos solamente de minería ilegal, de extracción ilícita de minerales, sino que ya está atada a grupos de delincuencia organizada.
But where others have failed, the ICOFAN have managed to fend it off almost single-handedly, says Nicholas Mainville, who has worked with them through the years.
I think what the COFAN succeeded in doing is first to be fully united behind one strategy, one cause, and really walking together. We've seen many communities facing the similar threats, but not succeeding in being united behind this whole land defense strategy. And what the COFAN did in 2017, 2018 is basically set their goal, and they were ready to do anything to block any kind of gold mining rush or any kind of other extractive activities.
Living and surviving in the forest is part of what holds the Guardians together. They hunt and eat jungle animals like armadillos and agoutis when camping out on patrol. Before dawn, the COFAN rise to take yoko, scraping the bark from a special vine and mixing it with fresh water from the brook comes the woody-flavoured liquid. Containing caffeine and theobromine, a substance found in chocolate, it's a bit like a double espresso straight from Mother Nature, though perhaps a little more bitter. But it was enough to power me through the day after rising at 4 in the morning. The Ai COFAN consider it a medicinal plant that they can take daily. They also use yahe, also known as ayahuasca, which is well known for its powerful psychoactive effects. Customs like this bind them to their land, says Sinangoe's community leader, Wider Guaramag.
Nosotros necesitamos del territorio para poder seguir siendo AI, para seguir siendo AI COFAN. Siempre hacemos uso de la medicina, hacemos uso de los alimentos, de los productos, de los peces. Entonces, eso es parte de nosotros. Por eso cuidamos.
So far, they have kept miners out of their territory without resorting to violence.
El oro efectivamente es una riqueza que nos han heredado nuestros abuelos. Con ello entendemos que tal vez es un material que se encuentra en algún espacio del territorio que tiene mucho valor y es por eso que tal vez nosotros también protegemos.
But Guaramag says the mining contamination still reaches them, coming from the north, across the border in Colombia. The difference can be seen between the two tributaries that meet to form their sacred river.
For the Ai COFAN of Sinangoe, this fast-flowing river, the Aguarico, is sacred. It runs through their territory. They say just a few years ago it was crystalline. Now, as you can see, it's muddied and yellow as a result of illegal mining further upstream.
By river or on land, the Ai COFAN remain vigilant. They've faced death threats for their defense of their territory, but they've also received plaudits. Last year, Alexandra Narvaez and Alex Lusitante won the Goldman Environment Prize, which they accepted on behalf of the entire community.
Sinangoe ya no es como la comunidad que está como escondiditos por allá, sino se ve como en la imagen mismo, en el rostro de los jóvenes mismos ya.
He has hope that even when technology seems at odds with the old ways, the young will continue to protect the land of their ancestors.
Y yo he escuchado de muchos jóvenes como subir a las montañas y decir, esto me llena de alegría, me llena de felicidad y me llena de muchos ánimos para poder seguir defendiendo estos territorios. Y eso yo pienso que eso es lo que es como la ganancia más importante dentro de todos los procesos, que los mismos jóvenes sientan como la esencia del territorio, la riqueza mismo que hay ahí. Que la mayor riqueza no es el oro que está metido en las orillas de los ríos.
Holding on to the old ways and embracing the new, the Ai COFAN are showing by example how indigenous people are the best protectors of the Amazon rainforest.
Coming up.
It's been changing significantly, and there's less water, And I notice in the ground itself, it's like drying up and it's creating erosion. You see it finally snowed until in November. Usually we would get our snow around September. So that's how we know it's changing.
America's Now.
According to the UN, Native Americans are among the most underserved communities in the United States. They face exclusion from work and educational opportunities, as well as political participation. Now, a changing climate is adding to their challenges. Alasdair Baverstock reports.
You have to honor Mother Earth being a Native American. As far as for Navajo, that's what we do. So you have to honor everything from the sunrise to the dawn. My name is Verlina. My clans are Hanagahni, born for Todik Kia Ani, are my Nali, the Bethalajina is my Che. So I have grandkids, and that's where I have to be the pillar to make that stability and to incorporate all our traditional culture, belief, the philosophy. So we came from Mother Earth, from Father Skies, and we're the children in between. I have seen the season changing. There's less water. And I notice in the ground itself, it's like drying up and it's creating erosion because of all the commotion on the American side. No one's honoring Mother Earth. That's where Mother Earth and Father Sky are angry. And we're in the middle, like I said, the children.
Navajo Nation in northeast Arizona, an arid region the size of West Virginia. Having held the status of indigenous reservation land since 1868, today it's home to around 200,000 people. Keith Howard is the director of the Navajo Nation government's Climate Change Awareness Program.
Yate, my name is Keith Howard. Tachitni and Shlon, Toatlini, Bashichin, Ditlani Dashiche, Bitani Dashinale. The Navajo people are a hunter-gatherer society. Tens of thousands of years ago, there was a land bridge, ice bridge that formed between the Russian and the North American border, way up there. And from that, the people were migrating with the animals during that time.
During planet Earth's last ice age, around 17,000 years ago, Native American tribes arrived on the North American continent from Asia, crossing the frozen ocean of the Bering Strait between modern-day Russia and Alaska.
That's how we came to be in existence here in the Southwest, was through those migration routes.
When that ice age ended and the ice bridge between Asia and North America melted, human society on the continent developed in isolation from the rest of the planet. That was until the age of European imperialism.
After years, we started noticing a different race of people, what we know now as the Bilagana, the white people, the white man. These white people started to stake land, claiming indigenous land as their own. Our Diné people were forced to give up their lands.
After years of war between the two peoples, agreement was reached for peaceful cohabitation.
The United States government, they allowed us to come back to our natural homelands with the signing of the Treaty of 1868.
These high plains of northeast Arizona were designated tribal lands, where the Navajo had the right to self-govern. The reservation was not a region which the young United States was interested in.
The United States government said that place is a wasteland. It's an extreme environment. There's harsh conditions there. And that's how, to this day, we're still here.
But 150 years on, in this extreme environment, climate change is hitting them hard.
Well, Navajo Nation is very large, And it's very arid, it's very dry. A lot of the people are relying on animals and grazing of animals and so forth, and you don't see, in general, the kind of irrigated agriculture you see in some of the lower parts of the Southwest. They sometimes describe themselves as a food desert because they only have 13 supermarkets in the entire Navajo Nation. It's estimated 30 to 35% of the population does not have running water to their homes.
Brian Klimowski is a meteorologist for the National Weather Service.
The reservation lands of northeast Arizona sit in a dry part of Arizona. It is in the rain shadow of the higher mountains in central and eastern Arizona.
So, has the climate over the Navajo Nation changed in recent years?
You bet, you bet. We've seen decreases in the water table. We've seen, let's say, 1 to 3 degrees of warming over the past 50 years up over the Navajo reservation, impacting growing seasons, for instance.
For a people who have farmed these lands the same way for centuries, a changing climate is making life very difficult.
It's been changing significantly, and there's less water. And I notice in the ground itself, it's like drying up, and it's creating erosion. You see, it finally snowed until in November. Usually we would get our snow around September. So that's how we know it's changing.
For Larry Sosi, a local rancher, the weather is making life very hard.
The drought really impact on the people. For the past years, we had no rain, we didn't have no snow, but just dust storm.
Not only is there less rain, but when it does fall, it is torrential. The more extreme weather has broken many of the man-made dams the Navajo use to stop and store surface water.
This monsoon season time, the water used to come down here, and then it used to sit right here. Within 4 years, this earth dam broke. This one no longer holds water. The impact of this one is trying to get it fixed. It can be fixed and then try to get it working again, but it's just no help.
The already extreme terrain of Navajo Nation is seeing the accelerated effects of climate change.
So they're a naturally dry location. So any changes in the climate can have an amplified impact over that area because they're already quite dry.
How extreme this terrain is, it's really poor. It's really poor.
Not content to simply observe the changing climate, Verlena has been collecting samples from her produce over recent years to show the effects on her crop.
This is the corn that I grew in my little farm plot, my garden. And it shows the difference by the year due to climate change. The top one, I started planting in 2015. So as you see, the corn is bigger, the kernel is bigger. 2015, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, and 22. As you see, it's getting smaller. The reason being is because of climate change. There's less water. When it rains vigorously, and then it's just a runoff. You know how the ground's just dry, and it just runs off, and when it runs off, it takes the soil with it.
The corn plant is the basis of human civilization on the American continent, and for this Navajo elder, the fact that it no longer flourishes here is a worrying sign.
Corn is used for a number of things. The corn represents the whole Navajo community, not community, but the Navajo culture, who we are as a person.
With no forecast that the climate change is slowing down, the situation on the reservation is only expected to worsen.
People are very sensitive to the weather. Simply because of the warmer temperatures, we will see greater drought impacts.
And as the climate becomes more extreme, many Navajo are leaving.
A lot of our young generations are leaving the reservation. That's the only way you'll succeed in life. That's the only way you'll become something.
Of the under 30 population raised on their ancestral lands, locals here estimate more than 80% ultimately end up settling off reservation.
Our ancestral teachings have really given us strength over time to be resilient individuals.
Michionne Gorman is the Adaptation Program Director at the Phoenix Indian Center.
And so when they come here to these major urban areas, there is several different challenges that are very unique to these communities, navigating a way of life that has been very, very different from their ways of living that they grew up with.
My name is Munti Sinqua, coming from the Hopi, Tewa, and the Choctaw Nations.
Munti is a champion Navajo dancer in his specific event, the hoop dance. He grew up on the Navajo reservation, but after leaving as a young man, he has spent his adult life in the westernized United States. He says the neighboring areas are two different realities.
Oh, it's drastically different. It's two different worlds. Down here, it's a really fast pace, everything's moving quickly. On the reservation, it's very laid back, everything happens real slow. When a lot of the young people did come out here to live or to go to school, I think the difficulty was being removed from your family, because out on the reservation, your family support is pretty strong, because, you know, as well as our clanship relations, and you come to the city and you're by yourself.
Many of them might be turning to things like substance abuse or having mental health challenges that are very difficult to address, especially when who might not understand the cultural significance of authority, of healing practices, and of what family and community really means.
There's no job here. When they get their master's degree, when they get their PhD, when they come back to the reservation, then they go to Window Rock to apply for a job, they're always being told, you're overqualified. We cannot hire you.
With the increasingly extreme climate making life on the Navajo reservation unsustainable, as people leave, this ancient tribe fears the loss of their culture.
As Indigenous people, we are very connected to the land that we come from. Our traditional teachings have really taught us to be caretakers of the land, of resources around us. And unfortunately, the impacts of colonization has led to an increase of Native folks needing to leave their ancestral homelands in order to sustain their normal ways of living.
When you do leave the reservation or leave your homeland, you do tend to change and assimilate to whatever community you're in, because you have to. It makes life easier for you. So way back when I was growing up, my grandparents and great-grandparents felt sometimes it was better when you could learn English better than you could learn your traditional tongue. And I think you do lose a lot, losing the language, losing the way of life. But that being said, there's also a resurgence in some of the communities as well, with educating the youth, not only in the language, but also in the plant life, the medicines, just everyday teachings.
The Navajo have been on these lands far longer than the European arrivals who turned the United States into the country it is today. They say, given their wisdom regarding Mother Earth and Father Sky, that they can contribute to the issue of the changing global climate.
The future of the Navajo Nation, of the Diné Nation, will really depend on education. That's one of the main reasons why our program was to bring awareness about climate change, bring educational outreach about the scientific views of global warming, about the idea of conservation, to save what we have for our future generations, to realize that we are in a crisis state, conditions that are happening within our own homelands.
Coming up.
In Mexico, we
we speak Spanish, and also we have like English lessons like in the school. So if we Mexicans are like trying to learn more about other countries, other languages, why Americans aren't trying to learn another language?
America's Now.
Welcome back to America's Now. In 2022, a record number of Americans moved to Mexico. That migration flow created jobs and opportunities, but it also disturbed the local real estate market. Home prices have risen so much, some areas have become inaccessible to Mexican citizens. Mike Kirsch reports.
So many Americans are moving to Mexico City these days, you're just as likely to hear jazz on any given night. There's American barbecue here at Pinche Gringo. High-end shopping here rivaling Beverly Hills. And ridiculously cool condos for ridiculously low rents or price tags. That has led to an estimated 2 million Americans alone arriving in Mexico City in 2022. You could say to improve their vision. From this to this.
No tan bien, pero.
Just ask New York transplant Alexandra Demus, founder and CEO of one of the hippest, most popular relocation companies here in Mexico City called Welcome Home Mexico. That's helped move thousands of Americans here over the years, among them from Fortune 500 companies to staff workers with the U.S. government. And recently, more Americans than ever before, she says, are flooding into Mexico City.
It does feel like there's some kind of a wave that everybody's riding. And I do feel like they're flooding in. I mean, statistically, numbers are saying that hundreds of thousands of Americans are coming in on a monthly basis just to Mexico City.
Mexicans are said to have a mixed reaction to so many Americans moving here. On one hand, there are statues of Abraham Lincoln and Martin Luther King Jr. here honoring the U.S.-Mexico relationship. On the other hand, some Mexicans say it just seems that lately too many Americans are showing up here. Sort of like the many northern ducks flying south to Mexico City's parks each year, thinking they own the place, until they're reminded they don't. Mexicans say there definitely seems to be some growing pains going on, and curiosity why so many Americans are moving here. A lot of it, say Americans, starting during the COVID pandemic.
During the pandemic, I think a lot of younger Americans saw that they could work remotely, and that opened up a whole new world. So they started thinking, where can I go that's not too far from the States, where I'll have a better quality of life, where I can still get home quickly when I need to, even pop in for a meeting or whatever it might be. And of course, Mexico is the place to be at the moment.
Recent Mexico City arrival Ulysses Head-On, an immigration attorney from Miami, could not believe, he says, how cheap this luxury 2-bedroom, 2.5-bathroom condo was here in Mexico City's affluent Polanco neighborhood. In Miami, he says he'd pay $5,000 to $6,000 a month for a place like this. Here, he's only paying $1,600 a month.
I mean, I'm paying the equivalent of $1,600 here.
$1,600?
Yeah.
1,600.
Yes. Yes.
Amazing. He says there's no question the rising cost of living in the U.S. and escaping the pandemic has led to Americans fleeing the U.S. to Mexico City in such big numbers.
Things like the pandemic that really, it was a total paradigm shift for everybody. And I think when people realize that I can earn the same and live wherever I want, You go to someplace else where obviously your expenses are far less than that they are in the States. And unfortunately, for a variety of reasons, the U.S. is becoming, or is already, utterly unaffordable.
Americans are also buying up properties here in Mexico City for a fraction of what they'd pay in expensive U.S. housing markets like New York or California.
Here in Mexico City, a lot of people are tending to go to the neighborhoods like Condesa, Roma, Cuauhtemoc, and the reason mainly is pricing. Housing is still extremely affordable in those areas. You can get a very decent apartment or a house from, let's say, $300,000 to $600,000 US dollars. Definitely would not be possible in a place like New York or California, or any big city in the United States where housing now is, starting at $1 million.
Meanwhile, the Mexican government says Americans in Mexico are greatly contributing to the economy here. For example, international tourism in 2022 earned Mexico nearly $30 billion. No small part of that, says the government here, from Americans spending money in Mexico City.
I think in general the Mexicans are extremely happy that the Americans are here. I think, of course, there are some concerns. I think that there are, of course, people that come to Mexico that maybe don't speak Spanish, don't make such an effort to learn the language, don't make such an effort to understand the culture or the history of the country. So I think that can cause a little bit of conflict.
However, some Mexicans say the conflict is a little more than just a little bit and seems to be growing worse by the day. Says Mexican philosophy teacher and cultural critic Fernando Bustos Grope, who complains Americans are driving up the costs of rents and home sales here at a time when average Mexican families are struggling to find an affordable place to live and are now, in many cases, being displaced in their own city. All the Americans arriving here he refers to as a sort of contemporary colonialism.
Ya de alguna manera sí, porque justamente es como un color de piel hegemónica, nacionalidad hegemónica, y llegan a estos lugares a imponer lo suyo, ¿no? Y ahora lo que tenemos, por ejemplo, lugares o pueblos que están llenos de gringos, ¿no? Porque son ellos los que llegan y fácilmente compran tierra y construyen. Así de pronto tenemos ya pueblos donde ya casi no hay, digamos, locales, ¿no? Porque fueron desplazados. Y eso de alguna manera es un colonialismo contemporáneo, ¿no? Es un colonialismo contemporáneo que se construye desde el color de piel, desde la nacionalidad y desde el dinero. Y hay un desplazamiento fuerte, ¿no? Pero también tenemos que ser conscientes de que este dinero, esta derrama económica, no es que suceda horizontalmente, no es que todos se beneficien de esta derrama económica.
What upsets him just as much, he says, is Americans who show up and expect Mexicans like him to speak English.
Americans, they speak only one language, no? It's English, no? In Mexico, we speak Spanish, and also we have like English lessons like in the school because we are like neighbors of US, but that doesn't imply that most of the Mexicans speak English. So if we Mexicans are like trying to learn more about other countries, other languages, why Americans aren't trying to learn another language, no? It's a little bit Spanish or any other language.
Uber driver Abel says business has benefited from so many Americans coming to Mexico City, but says he remembers one American customer calling him some vulgar names because he did not speak English.
Bueno, una sola ocasión sí me tocó a una señora que no le entendía, pero yo con el lenguaje universal y la mímica, ¿no? Le dije buenos días, le ayudo con sus cosas a subir a la cajuela y ella me hablaba en inglés y yo le dije no, yo no hablo inglés. Y sí se molestó y me empezó a decir en su idioma y sí escuché palabras antisonantes que eran groserías. Yo por respeto no le dije nada, pero sí ellos se molestan que uno no sepa el inglés, se molestan mucho.
It's not uncommon in some places for signs being posted telling Americans to go home, in not the most pleasant of terms. Fernando says it basically comes down to Americans and other foreigners being more aware and respectful of Mexicans.
Y creo que esta conciencia, o generar la conciencia, creo que tiene que ser sobre todo hacia los norteamericanos, hacia los extranjeros que vienen solamente como bajo esta idea de que es muy barato México. Pero vienen, vamos por así decirlo, como sin ningún tipo de responsabilidad ética de por medio, y al final pues vienen y se van, ¿no? Y entonces agarran como México como si fuera, o Ciudad de México, o México en general como si fuera como un patio de diversiones, como un lugar simplemente como para ir a divertirse, pero no tienen ningún tipo de compromiso ético, no lo asumen ni con relación a la gente del entorno, a la gente local, ni con relación a las tradiciones, ni con relación al idioma, ni a la cultura.
Though many new American arrivals like Ulysses say they are well aware of Mexican history and culture and how special a place Mexico is to live.
Mexico is a huge country, 31 states, 120 million people, 77 indigenous languages are spoken here. This is where the avocado came from, the cacao. There's even a chocolate museum here in Mexico City. It's a very rich country.
Viva México.
They are the most kind.
Amazingly nice. I think historically, some of the most polite. If you know anything about Spanish, if you don't speak Spanish and you're starting to learn, I think Spanish is one of the most respectful languages. You know, you never give someone an order. It's never like, give me that. It's always, would you mind, you know, could you please pass me that? So starting from their language, in history, culture, how important family is to them, their you know, sense of belonging, friends, all of that. It's, I think, one of the most respectful and friendly societies that I've known.
Alexandra says all of these reasons are why more Americans than ever are contacting relocation companies like hers. In terms of security here, Americans in Mexico City, she says, generally feel as safe or safer than in big cities in the United States.
I feel safer here than I do in New York. I don't know if I want to say. I don't know if I want to say that, but I personally have a lot of clients that come to Mexico very fearful, worried about thinking that Mexico is unsafe. I have never had a problem. I have never felt unsafe, and I actually feel like every year it gets safer.
There are nearly 30 million people living in and around Mexico City, leaving most Mexicans to agree there is room for Americans too, as well as the benefits Americans bring to the economy here. Though other Mexicans are saying basta, enough already. However, they say if Americans keep coming, learning to speak Spanish and minding your manners does go a long way toward everyone getting along.
Coming up.
La gente de origen campesino tiene varios problemas. Por ejemplo, el sistema educativo, sí, tenemos un sistema educativo que ha hecho un gran esfuerzo, pero por ejemplo no hay bibliotecas. ¿Cómo puedes tú desarrollar algo si no tienes biblioteca?
America's Now.
The South American country of Bolivia is one of the poorest in the region, but it's reached a notable milestone in terms of social development. According to global standards set by the United Nations, it has virtually eliminated illiteracy. Harris Whitbeck reports.
A civic celebration in Bolivia. It's a traditional parade in the Andean town of Pucarani to commemorate the founding of the community. Among the dignitaries marching on this sunny morning, one of several women stands out.
Mi nombre es Susana Falcón Coaquira, soy del municipio Pucarani, provincia de Los Andes, del departamento de La Paz, Bolivia, y actualmente estoy con un cargo, ¿no?, como secretaria municipal de Desarrollo Humano del Gobierno Autónomo Municipal de Pucarani.
Susana Falcón is proud to greet her constituents and proud of one of her greatest accomplishments. She helped push an initiative that is rapidly doing away with illiteracy among the adults in the community. Susana knows firsthand how difficult access to education can be in rural Bolivia.
El hombre es el que primero tiene el privilegio de gozar incluso en la alimentación. El varón es el que primero se le puede dotar esto de la educación, de la vestimenta, un sinfín de cosas que no hemos ido pasando a lo largo de nuestra vida, pero yo doy gracias a que se me ha dado la oportunidad de poder estudiar, de poder acceder a una formación educativa.
In her case, she was able to leverage her education into forging a political career, and from her position in power, she now works to do away with the same type of inequality she had to face as a young girl.
A partir del año 2009, ya que el gobierno ya instaura esto de poder facilitar a los adultos mayores este tipo de alfabetización, el que ellos puedan conocer, leer, por lo menos poder escribir el nombre. Y cuán grato es ver a una persona, ¿no? Es el que escriba su nombre a sus 80 años, 70 años, es pues como si ellos conquistasen algo tan grande como ahora a veces se puede decir ir al espacio, ¿no? Es un logro grande para ellos, y yo he visto en varias oportunidades derramar lágrimas a ellos al ver poder escribir su nombre. Me decían, hermana Susana, ya sé escribir mi nombre, y creo que es tan grato el poder hacer la A, la B, la C y todo el alfabeto.
Acá es y kuna o, a ver, ¿capcha? Ah, ya, O, ¿no? Entonces, para quiero quitar O minúscula, imprenta minúscula. Ya, igual.
Bolivia started tackling its illiteracy rates among the highest in the world in 2007, shortly after the leftist activist Evo Morales won the presidency. The government printed and distributed teaching materials aimed at adults and charged public school teachers with implementing the program. Efraín Nina Cutipar has been a school teacher in the Bolivian Andes since 2008.
Notan que en Bolivia existe analfabetismo, ¿no?, absoluto y funcional. Personas que, por ejemplo, que han cursado hasta el primer grado, segundo grado, ¿no? Han cursado, pero que con el tiempo se han ido olvidando, ¿no? Y ellos ya han quedado como personas ya analfabetas funcionales, así lo podríamos llamar. Y otras que nunca pudieron ir a la escuela. Es por eso que surge la necesidad y como una política ya desde el gobierno central, de que toda nuestra población a nivel Bolivia ya puedan leer y escribir.
Students, some in their late 70s and 80s, attend weekly classes and complete assignments on basic reading and writing. Berta, a mother, recently learned how to write her name.
Cuando he entrado al colegio solo te aprendí a firmar y hacer mi nombre, primero mi nombre y me aprendí después firmar. Quiero hacer leer y escribir todo eso, quiero aprender para mis hijos, quiero hacer, ayudar, por eso quiero hacer.
By 2022, the illiteracy rate in the country had been reduced to just over 2.5%. Most of the teachers volunteer their time using the official educational method put forth by Bolivia's Ministry of Education.
¿A quiénes lo trabajan? ¿Cómo lo trabajamos? Lo trabajan las maestras, los maestros de forma voluntaria. Ya de forma voluntaria, también, no solo maestros y maestras. Por ejemplo, en el caso de mí, yo soy director, pero yo también como maestro, plenamente, y también quiero contribuir algo, ¿no?, para mejorar este aspecto. Entonces, se ha podido trabajar también, no solo maestros y maestras, también personas voluntarias, ya con formación académica, no sean licenciados, no solo maestros, ya pueden ser ellos profesionales en otros rubros. Entonces, ellos también pueden incluirse, ¿no?, para ser facilitadores, ser maestros también, quienes puedan.
And educators are trying to make sure adult illiteracy does not return by fortifying the public school system, requiring all children to attend classes in a diverse course of studies that helps them to not only learn to read and write, but to apply their literacy skills to other aspects of life.
Hay sectores vulnerables en los cuales aún jóvenes no pueden acceder a la educación. En lugares más remotos que este, ¿no?, que se tarda 2 días de viaje, 3, entonces no se puede acceder. Pero estamos en esta lucha y nosotros como gobierno municipal, a través de nuestra autoridad máxima, nuestro alcalde, nuestro hermano Alberto Lucanaziñani, siempre vamos a estar apoyando, y más que todo la tarea que yo tengo como responsable es de poder ayudar y fomentar la educación, ¿no? Hay una frase tan linda que siempre ha calado mi alma y dice: la educación es el arma más poderosa del mundo. Nelson Mandela lo manifestaba y creo que en verdad es el nexo, ¿no?, para el progreso de todas las naciones.
But in traditional academic and literary circles, the literacy program is met with skepticism. Carlos Osterman runs La Paz's best-known bookstore, a gathering place where writers, critics, and academics meet to exchange ideas, debate, and philosophize. He is also an anthropologist, specialized in rural development. He says bringing the majority poor population to a basic degree of functional literacy is not enough if other development issues aren't solved.
La gente de origen campesino tiene varios problemas. Por ejemplo, el sistema educativo, sí, tenemos un sistema educativo que ha hecho un gran esfuerzo, pero por ejemplo no hay bibliotecas. ¿Cómo puedes tú desarrollar algo si no tienes bibliotecas, por ejemplo? Ahora, es también el concepto de país. No hay ciudades intermedias importantes a las cuales nutrirlas de varios servicios y de varios elementos vinculados, por ejemplo, con los colegios, la biblioteca, etcétera, etcétera. ¿No? Son pequeñas ciudades, pero la mayoría de ellas no tienen los servicios básicos. Entonces, si queremos realmente hacer algo sostenido en el tiempo, tenemos que comenzar a dotar de una infraestructura que permita una mayor relación con la lectura, por ejemplo.
Teaching people to read and write is not enough, especially in a multicultural country like Bolivia, where indigenous people have traditionally relied on a system of oral history and not the written word to express themselves.
El hecho que tú puedas firmar y saber qué es tu nombre ya es valioso, pero eso no es suficiente, ¿me entiendes? Necesitamos realmente que la gente le dé un valor al libro y que forme parte de su vida. Si no hay un mercado formal o informal del libro, porque aquí en Bolivia hay un mercado informal impresionante, ¿no es cierto? Si no hay un sistema de bibliotecas y no hay una serie de instituciones, ¿no es cierto?, como institutos técnicos, pero en Bolivia no hay institutos técnicos. Entonces, la gente simplemente utiliza esto de escribir como algo muy, muy funcional, muy necesario para atender ciertas cosas y nada más que eso. Entonces, además hay una realidad que es muy compleja también de entender, que las grandes mayorías, te hablo de los grupos aymaras, quechua, son ante todo y por sobre todo, tienen un pensamiento oral. Todo es a través de la palabra, no de la lectura, de la vista, ¿te das cuenta? Entonces, pasar de lo oral al libro es pues un salto cualitativo en el tiempo y en todo, ¿no? Entonces, si además no tienes una serie de apoyos que te permitan, ¿no es cierto?, atraparte con este elemento, yo no lo miro el libro solamente como un lugar de anécdotas, sino que veo que es algo que le permite ese autodesarrollo, ese crecimiento. Entonces, si no hay algo que te atrape, que no tenga, entonces no tiene sentido realmente desarrollar los hábitos de lectura y tener relaciones estrechas con la lectura.
But for people like Berta, who now knows what her name looks like in the written word, her new knowledge has at least cracked open a window into a new world, a world that proponents of the literacy program say offers so many opportunities it is impossible to ignore.
And that's it for this edition of America's Now. We'll see you again next time.